Ding, and we're live. Welcome to Beyond Binary, airing out the echo chambers. This week we're going to talk about an interesting topic which Toby will shortly introduce, but before that we're still thinking about having a live stream, so if anyone is interested in that, get in touch with us via Discord, Facebook, or any of the other ways of communication. And the plan is to do it one evening, one day, play some music and have a chat, so if you're interested, hit us up. So Toby, what are we talking about today?
I'm recording.
Can you hear me now? Yes, it does.
Excuse me, my crayon is a monkey. I find the conversation
Taking some interest in learning a bit more about technology, philosophy, and I like to.
I'm an educator.
Absolutely. We're going to stay anonymous.
That's a cop out.
The binary's gone. I thought jingle was like Dutch for cheers.
Well, guided by descendant Mercury into Saturn, I believe it's time for us Scorpios to step up and start putting things into perspective, for it's indeed an auspicious time of the year for all the water signs, and with Venus in transit, so close to the spring equinox, it's likely at least one of us is going to bump into that tall, mysterious stranger that we talked about last time.
Wait. I thought we were talking about, like, space, you know, like...
astrology.
No, the scientific part of space, goddammit.
Astronomy.
Like, the real hard data affects
Astronomy.
Space.
It's astronomy, Toby.
All right, fair enough. Okay, in which case, I have no idea what I'm doing here today then, but thank the gods that today's guest is our resident science and technology expert, Johnny. Hello and welcome.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Johnny.
How you been?
Good. I haven't left the house in a while, but yeah, it's been good. I hate people, so that works right for me.
Maybe you kind of either discover that you hate people, or it's quite convenient if you do. You know,
I think I've
be
been
locked
forced
in.
into starting to hate people now. I didn't used to be like this, but now I am.
It's easier if you do that.
Come to terms
Things
with
have changed me. Yeah.
So what are we talking about today then, chaps?
Yeah, so we're talking about space, and I think the reason why I requested this subject is probably to do with the launch of Perseverance recently. And I just had such a weird image in my mind about the fact that apparently in our reality, if you have a clunk of gas and dust, you brew it up, it becomes a big rock. And on that rock, eventually, some life may start to exist. And on that life, it may at some point evolve into a monkey. And apparently that monkey then evolved into understanding things like mathematics and 1 + 1 is 2 and a lot more complicated things. And then apparently that monkey was able to send another rock, a metal rock, into space, land it on another globe that is moving with quite some speed through this space, and then have an artificial intelligence electronics land with cables, a machine on that rock, that it did it itself. We found out 11 minutes after it happened that it even happened, and that just blew my mind.
Mad, isn't it?
And yeah, so I just want to talk about, where are we with space exploration, and also just what the fuck is space, because it's scarily big and scarily confusing. And also we've recently learned fairly much about it, I would say, in the past 100 years.
Wait. Are you saying it's actually difficult to send something to the moon? It's not just strap something into a rocket and then fly it out there?
Well, it's possible, but it's also very expensive, and that's probably why we haven't done it since the 70s.
Well, the Chinese have gone recently, haven't they? I think they put the flag on the moon, but it wasn't a manned mission. It was just a rover, lunar rover, and they plonked down a flag. So we've got the American and Chinese flags up there.
I think it was one of the first landers. So it's the Chang lander. I think it's one of the first landers that went to the dark side of the moon, opposed to the outside. Dark side, as in we can't see it. I'm not sure if you.
It's never facing the Earth.
It's not evil.
Tightly locked together, but there might be occasions when the arse of the moon is facing to the sun, and it's fairly light. It survived longer than they expected to. It did a lot of good stuff, and they are sharing the information, which is good to hear.
I don't know if you guys remember. Did any of you hear about that? That Google were doing like an amateur kind of competition for a lunar rover, and they had some prize money and stuff, and then the successful one would eventually be launched up there.
Yeah.
Have you heard any updates on that at all? Because I remember reading about it, but I haven't heard an update.
I know there's last time I checked, there's 3 front runners. There's one Indian company, there's one US company funded by universities, and I think there's another one I can't remember. But it's meant to be novel ideas. It's meant to be. There's got quite a few tight constraints on budgets and other items, and it's all meant to be private. It's purely about getting back to the moon. So I think everyone considers the moon as a good stopping off
launching point, right?
Yeah, to build onto the next where we go from next. And it's one of the reasons to be honest, I'm surprised that Elon kind of skipped.
Yeah, and he's going for Mars directly. Yeah, that's always what surprised me.
Yeah,
too.
I think because he knows that NASA are building.
For the moon, it's the Artemis program.
That's the one. Artemis is daughter of Apollo in mythology.
Okay, I didn't know that.
I think he just wanted to beat NASA.
Is it nothing to do with?
He's got a plan.
Like the potential of terraforming on Mars, and maybe we can do a little bit more with Mars than with the moon in the long term.
I think he's got a stratagem, and I think it is just that it is a little bit easier, albeit further away. With the moon, it's the stepping point, but two, it's only 3 days away, whereas the Mars being 3 months away.
But in the galactical sense, Mars is still quite close, right? If you ever want to become a intergalactic civilization,
every 4 years it's quite close. Other than that, it's very far away.
In galactical terms, it's quite close.
Yes. But yeah, you've got to imagine when we spin around the Earth and around the Sun, we're not always close to Mars, but you tend to launch at certain transfer orbits where you would make it the shortest distance over there, which is why 3 months is kind of the average.
Are you saying it takes 3 months to get to Mars? What?
At the best.
Yeah, roughly. Because in space, if you speed up, the wonderful thing about space travel is that once you only spend fuel accelerating or decelerating, and that's the important thing. When you could get there quicker, but you'd have to slow down quick as well. You don't want to be slowing down quickly at the last minute, especially if you're a warm sack of human bits. We don't really like much more than 10 Gs.
Why do I think they took years to get there? Because here's the technology has moved forward so much since last time I looked into this.
It's 3 to 9 months.
Maybe the equipment got lighter, maybe that we can accelerate it a bit easier than stuff like the Voyager. But in the end, it's still like you're still working with the same laws of physics, right?
Well, Voyager does clever things because you've not got a person to keep alive on it. It uses something called gravity assists to basically.
You can't do that if someone is in there alive.
Well, you can. There is something called orbitals or synchrotals. I can't remember what the name of it, but basically what it is you'd set up lots of different spaceships, all going in orbits around Earth and Mars, basically, and you would launch from Earth. You get to low Earth orbit, and then you'd burn off and you join this other spaceship that was always going in trips and circles between Earth and Mars. You join the trip over to Mars there, and then you disconnect the other end and launch back down again. There'd have to be another one going the opposite direction to come back again, and you have to wait for those to come up, and those would possibly take longer, but because it's always going to be there, you could set up a bit more of a nicer habitat. You could possibly have it spun up and create some sort of artificial gravity or something else like that, or put people in some deep sleep or other mechanisms. So there are many different ways of doing it, and I think that's the way they think of doing it in the future, is having a metro system almost set up that you would always travel forward and backwards with.
I was just going to say it's like a train system in space, isn't it?
So why haven't we done it yet then?
Costs, right?
Inclination, cost. I mean, this is the big thing. Is there's a shift between private organizations doing and governments doing science and space launches compared to Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or the others doing it. And Elon, don't believe Elon's hype. He does tell you he's the cheapest, and to be honest, out of all the private guys, he is the cheapest. But if you compare it to NASA, he ain't that cheap. I appreciate the shuttle and Apollo and all these other things might seem expensive on paper, but when you actually compare the numbers between what Elon is doing, even though he's doing these clever things about reuse, he's actually a lot more expensive. But you don't have all the sunk costs of the whole people that are there needing to constantly run an Apollo program or.
Well, that is exactly, because that is the problem with both the European and American space programs, is that they keep having to invest quite a lot of money and keep the structure running that has been running, quite a lot of people that need to be kept busy, right? And so they make up a lot of programs. Many of those programs don't go anywhere And meanwhile, what I do think is really strange about the NASA and the European programs is that they don't have any strategy for reusable rockets. SpaceX...
It doesn't save you that much money.
Well...
It doesn't.
Well,
it really doesn't.
The idea of spaceship is to go up and land and go up again.
Maybe
right?
they'll just buy them from Elon.
So it's going to save a lot of money.
So what the biggest cost and the biggest thing is the fact that the majority of a rocket is fuel. These payloads to orbit are a ton and a half or something to Mars, or 10 tons into low Earth orbit. 10 tons isn't very much. If you consider the size of those rockets, the rest of it is fuel. Now, if you have to consider the way Elon does it, he basically, rather than expend, so that it's like a Formula One race. In a Formula One race, you want to be able to cross the finish line and the car to literally fall to pieces. You don't want to engineer it any more than that because it's all wasted. So what Elon's done, he's over-engineered these things to be able to last 15 times, 20 times or whatever. And he also has to save fuel for turning the rocket around, deorbiting and landing again. And all of that extra weight adds to the, takes away from the payload to orbit and adds to the mission cost. The benefit he has got, though, is the fact that he's always constantly using them. Unlike, NASA, they, it would cost a lot more, and you wouldn't be necessarily as interested as getting, something onto a NASA rocket, or the same for the Russians. That's why most people go to the Soyuz, because it's very old technology. The sunk costs already in R&D. They don't need to go and spend it on again. But it's, it's a little bit riskier, but it's cheap. Whereas Elon's come along and he's just constantly launching these rockets all the time.
And calculate with SpaceX is that they pay for it with their own satellite constellation that they're putting into the sky.
Yeah, they can launch duplicate things.
They're their own biggest customer, and they know that they can launch all those rockets because they do need to have that constellation for the internet. Starlink up. Without that, they probably it wouldn't even work out financially. But yeah, the question, why haven't we done the visit to the moon? Is because I don't know the exact percent of budget that went on to there. The yearly budget that NASA was getting was quite big. Yeah, in the 70s.
It was big, wasn't it?
And sure, we're not even spending, I think, that amount of money on saving the environment, which is then us going to Mars, where we still can't survive without terraforming the planet. Leave alone exoplanets that are light years away, and we don't know how to travel light years away yet. I found the... Actually, we can get there in...
True.
We can get there in...
Chuck people in cryo chambers, send them off there.
We can get there in a few years.
I played
There's
Alpha Centauri.
This breakthrough starshot experiment, where they're trying to make very small light sail things, and it will be projected with a laser that will fire from Earth onto the sail, giving it more and more energy. And they're planning to fly out a fleet of 1 million of those to Proxima system, and I think that took 5 years or something, enough that we can at least get the data back and do something with that within one lifetime, right?
These little craft can beam back data, no?
Yeah, CubeSats, tiny little satellites. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The problem with that is that you'd have to build a laser the other end to bring you back again. And I haven't looked into it too much, but I've always looked at it and gone, it looks like a nightmare for steering it. Absolutely. I mean, it was a rocket, fine. Point it, go.
Well, that's why they're sending so many of them. It's okay, a lot of them will die due to... Well, you have debris and you have radiation, space radiation, and...
The warp.
Debris and
things will hit it. Things will die on the way out there. Even in vacuum.
Asteroids.
Vacuum isn't complete empty vacuum in space either. And so, yeah, you're just hoping that maybe 1 or 2 arrive in the right location to make a picture that we can send back and we have something from it.
That would be crazy, though. Do you remember, back in the day when they had, first pictures of Pluto, and it was whoa. Now it's we've mapped the surface. It's just incredible the rate at which this kind of our technology is improving and the missions are developing. It's difficult to keep up with, but... Sure,
but on the other hand, right, we have pictures of Pluto now, but we haven't been back to Neptune or Uranus since the Voyager 1. We've had only one close encounter satellite going past there.
The wonderful thing that happened in the 70s when they sent the 2 Voyager missions off was I don't know how often this happens. It's hundreds or 40s or 50 every 50 years, but the planets lined up in such a way.
So Toby was right.
the gravity assists worked, that they could do a shed load of gravity assists and basically get to those places with very, very little fuel.
We've got a lot of different topics today, and the first one is my favourite, because I'm writing another little short story, and it's about the Fermi Paradox. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that. The basic idea, as far as I understand it, is that there's loads and loads of planets. There's loads of planets that could support life, but where is everyone? Where are they then? That's the question. Why don't we see them? Why haven't we met them? Or have we? It's based on something called the Drake equation. Maybe, Johnny, you could talk a little bit about the Drake equation and fill us in on some of the details.
I always forget the Drake equation, but it's...
You have to multiply different factors together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a probabilistic thing, basically, because the thing with the Fermi Paradox is it's a bit ironic, because if you try to prove it and then you eventually do prove it, it kind of removes the point of there being the paradox, and it removes the point of there being the Drake equation. But the Drake equation is the likelihood there are other civilizations like us or more advanced in our universe. Because as you said, the universe is big, the universe is old. Where the hell is everyone? So you take, the amount of stars that could have a Goldilocks zone that could have life. Then you have the number of planets that could fit into that zone. And then the number of likelihood that Genesis has happened on that planet has spawned life, and then that life has then actually become intelligent, and then whether they have actually been developed technologies or technologies that we can detect have been around long enough for that to be detectable whilst we've been around and haven't killed themselves off.
Haven't killed themselves off yet, as we're about to maybe do as well,
by mistake or on purpose, right?
No.
Whilst I bash the Drake equation a bit, the people are still looking into it, and there's still studies coming out about it, and it's actually driving forward the way we are looking for alien life in quite interesting ways. Because one of the big ones that I always trip up on, so the first 4 or 5 terms in the equation are quite easy to understand. How big is the universe? We've definitely got better at that now. How many stars out there are like our own? Because that's the one we know supports life. We've got a lot of experiments.
Yeah, exactly. Found loads recently as well.
Yeah,
right?
We've got experiments running at the moment that are now finding these sorts of planets, and even those sorts of stars, and even then finding those sorts of exoplanets that then could habit life, which is really bolstering the numbers and giving you actually real world data to work on. It's not answering the question, but in a Bayesian sense, it's giving you a more of an accurate kind of probability. But the bit that trips me up is life, whether we can actually find life, and then the other one is whether they are communicating in a form that we can work with. So I think the standard term they put into the Drake equation is if it's been around, well, they assume it's roughly been around 10,000 years and they're communicating with radio waves. But if you look at ourselves, we've been communicating with radio waves only 100 years or so, but then part the way through that 100 years, we moved from analog to digital.
And isn't it stopping now anyway with digital?
But even the radio waves, like how far did we travel with radio waves? It's about 200 million light years.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah,
200 light years, I think. And you know how far 200 light years is? It's not that very far. It's not that.
Yeah, and then it'd be really quiet. It'd be indistinguishable from background noise.
People just haven't heard us, even if they're like 400 light years away. They still haven't heard us, right?
But the thing is, once you move up technologies, you start to compress data and encode data for security and for bandwidth reasons, and that data no longer becomes decipherable. You no longer demodulate that data without knowing how it's encoded, and then it just starts to sound like noise again. So actually, I do have a bit of a problem with that, and that's why they're starting to look at different ways of looking at it. If you start to think about really advanced civilizations that would be out there, then they would have other signatures that we could look for. So like the Dyson spheres is the one that's come up recently. If a civilization has been able to conquer their solar system, then they might be able to actually take power directly from their star. Tabby's star came up recently, and everyone was like, "Is this proof of a possible Dyson sphere?" No shit, it's just a dusty cloud. But
it could be a swarm, couldn't it? It doesn't necessarily have to be like an actual sphere.
Yeah, Dyson sphere, Dyson swarm.
What seems more logical to communicate with light signals than with radio waves, right? You can travel further.
I was thinking the same thing, blocking the sun on and off. Yeah.
is when, depending on when do you want to be found or not.
Yeah.
And that's another one of the things that comes up. So radio waves, we've just been polluting our near space with radio waves. Hitler's speech, and the Simpsons TV programs. What the hell are they going to think about?
Well.
Single female
yeah,
lawyer.
we might just been that neighbor who's just been making so much freaking noise,
Yeah.
and then one day it's like there's just banging on the front door. We're like, oh, is that the guy who just keeps on playing Hitler's speeches?
Right.
Maybe we shouldn't just pretend we're not.
That's the crazy
like-
as well. Because what if they're hearing now how humanity used to be in the 50s? And then the nearest civilization like, okay, we'll have to wipe those fuckers out. And then by the time we get here, we've repaired the planet. We're all good beings. But they're still thinking, oh, those motherfuckers need to go.
Yeah, but the thing is, as you said, with we were talking with something like light rather than radio waves, or almost being the same thing, but a bit more permeable. But you'd have to be actively trying to talk to someone. You'd actually have to be pointing it in a direction and say, right, I'm trying to communicate with these people, rather than just blasting it into the cosmos and hoping someone picks up the phone and says, oh, hey.
So then that Drake equation then leads to the Fermi Paradox, right? And the Fermi Paradox is like, why are we alone?
It's the other way around. So the Drake equation is trying to answer the
it's the other way around. Ah, okay. So Fermi came up with it first, and then
Exactly.
Drake came up with his sums. Okay. So then maybe we could talk about some solutions to the Fermi Paradox, because there's lots of different possibilities, right? That could have come up, or could be the possibility. So one, you were saying that we just Johnny, you mentioned the main one there, that the systems of communications are just really different. So for that reason, we just don't end up communicating with anyone, right? What are any others that you guys have come across? One that I found was, you can imagine maybe the Tyranids in Warhammer, just some species that comes in and just devastates everything it comes into contact with. Do you know what I mean? Just gets all the biomass, all of the life, all the resources, all the water from planets, and it just kind of swarms through.
Or basically what we're saying is that there's a alien entity that is so utterly alien that we can't really quite comprehend, or we wouldn't be able to identify that this is intelligent life if we saw it, because they're either so primal and low technology, like Tyranids, or that they are just, I don't know, beings of ether. They're sort of non-carbon life forms.
Yeah, what about life forms in a different way, like life forms that are just consciousness or something like that, or that exist in a different dimension?
But if there's a different dimension, it doesn't need to be out into space, right? It could be right next to you. I think personally, the universe is just a very difficult place to be in, and there's a lot of violent stuff happening out in the universe, and I think there might be quite a lot of life. I'm not sure if there's quite a lot of intelligent life that also manages to get a technological degree and live long enough to use that technology anywhere in the universe. And I think we're just a very good example of it. I think we're very rare evolution of the universe. The fact that we're even at this level conscious, and we can think consciously at the levels that we're thinking, and we're about to extinct ourselves anyway.
We're not, though. That's the thing. Sorry to just jump in again, because you mentioned this before, and I disagree. The whole point why we're trying to colonize Mars is that so the billionaires can leave the planet before it all implodes, so they can build harems on Mars. So it's just like Elon and Jeff Bezos and 20 odd women each. And and humanity will live on, and isn't that beautiful? I mean, that's why I bought a Tesla.
It's Chris's utopia, isn't it?
Well, if you start taking a step back into the Drake equation, and starting what Merrin said about first off the likelihood of life turning up, and I mean we only know of on this planet of one instance of a genesis of life. It's not necessarily mean that there wasn't others that then didn't start, but I think they've done the math, they've done their homework, and they can show a big long list of how the genome goes back, winding that genome clock back, and can see when it fundamentally started.
And is Genesis the start of singular cellular life or multicellular life?
Singular cellular life. It's the point at which you would consider it life. Yeah. Complex life comes later, and that was a big happy accident where a eukaryote and another type of cell basically joined together to become, I think actually no, a eukaryote.
And that's something you could replicate somewhere else in the universe.
I don't think they've actually done it. Well, I think they might have done it, but it's one of those things of just like, well, how likely is this? It was one of those spoof things that happened that then kind of carried off. That was so two different forms of life kind of bumped into each other and then went, well, this is a symbiotic relationship that we can profit from, and it was fortuitous and spawned forward. So, I mean, genetics and evolution is that way it happens. Sometimes you can consider evolution as being, oh, isn't that clever? But it's actually just, beat your head against it a lot of times, and finally, you'll come up with a brilliant solution. That's.
But isn't that the same singular level maybe has arrived on a molecular level? So that just if you have sort of a soup that bangs against each other enough times with enough pressures from the right angles, and suddenly you have a cell?
Yeah, well, that's generally what I believe is the fact that genesis happens a lot of times, all the times, but then you get something which you then start to speak about, which we can then nicely segue into, which is what some people refer to as the great filters, which which stop it from happening. They over accelerate and pollute their own atmosphere and almost kill themselves off, or a cataclysmic event happens that like a meteor strike that wipes out too much of them and they can't sustain and they fall over, or they become so intelligent that they blow themselves up or whatever. But whilst that is, the filters are very, very heavy and show that it's very, very likely that you're going to cull off a lot of these things, you do also find that life always finds a way. That the meteor that hit, that supposedly wiped out the dinosaurs, we still survived. Lots of mammals still survived. And even if a dinosaur wiping out meteor hit us now, we'd still survive, and we wouldn't be on a Zoom call having chats about it, but we'd still be living.
Sure, but at a galactical scale, the moment the Milky Way crashes into Andromeda, this is kind of going to be over.
Exactly. Well, yeah, maybe.
But that's how long away is that? That's more than the sun.
That point leads off into the fact that there's possibly a lot of other life forms out there that have probably likely managed to survive cataclysmic events. I mean, those great filters are great for a reason, but there's possibly, due to near infinite numbers of these opportunities happening, that is fairly likely that something has happened.
There's just very small chance meeting him.
So, but self-aware life then, intelligent life.
Well,
okay, I believe like a primordial soup with simple organisms. I think it's plenty out there.
Yeah,
I think we might even find it near our own home. But
I'd agree with that.
It could be everywhere, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Even in the solar system, possibly.
I think the longer the universe goes on, and the longer a solar system goes on, and the longer a society goes on or a civilization goes on, the less effect those great filters have. So to step back a couple of stages, as the universe goes on, the more likelihood of there being complex, high, heavy elements out there goes on due to supernovae decay, blah, blah, blah. You get more likelihood of them creating life. Next step on, you've got life on a planet. The more chances of cataclysm that happen to it start to dwindle off after time. So, for example, meteorites, there'll be a period of heavy bombardment when the solar system was created. But after a while, those nasty asteroids get flung out or have already been done. So the probability of a disaster like that happening goes down. I mean, you're still going to possibly get hit by asteroids been flung out by another solar system, but it's like darts on a universal scale. The probabilities start really going down. And then when you get civilizations that have actually, you've got complex life that can survive in difficult situations and can mutate quickly and has got a population size that can deal with it. And then when you even start thinking about advanced life that's got technology to support that, the probabilities start going the other way. They start counteracting the filters. And you start thinking about, actually, once you get past a certain point, these guys possibly are more likely to survive, which lovely segues into the next section of the Drake equation, which is saying, well, intelligent life and then communicating, and then where they expand from there. I mean, you might get different civilizations that go, do you know what? I'm happy here, I'm going to sit here. That doesn't compute with me.
Non-expansionist.
Yeah, it doesn't compute. If you're a living organism and you want to procreate and you want to, continue, because you've got that drive in you to procreate and continue your bloodline, that there's no reason why you wouldn't expect of a civilization that was advanced enough to actually go, well, we have to colonize other planets to be able to keep that ethos going.
Evolution always expanded. At any opportunity it had, it expanded. That's why we see such a variety of life all across the world,
So
because it kept expanding wherever it could expand, right? One ant on the boat could expand maybe on two ants, but to another area where,
Yeah, just adapting to the different ecosystems. But then here we're applying the principles of evolution to like conscious thought, which might be a sort of a misstep. Do you know what I mean? Because now we could choose as individuals to do this, that, or the other.
Well, look at this, what we're doing.
Maybe culturally the civilization just goes, wow. I mean, like probably there's nothing out there. Maybe they just got the Drake equation, the flibbity-doo equation, whatever their equivalent is. And they just missed one key thing. And to them, it looks like the universe is completely empty. And they went, let's just go in a VR world. We'll get the power from the sun, or we'll build some spaceship with lovely VR suites, and we'll build our own world of infinite possibilities in our virtual world.
It's primarily socioeconomic factors that's currently slowing down the birth rates amongst Westerners, at least.
Mm-hmm.
But pretty much any society that reaches a certain point, like the birth rate starts going down because people are happy with less children. And also throughout history, there's always been built-in societal structures that has stopped us from having too many children to avoid overpopulation and eating all the food. Like the sort of population explosions only really been around the last couple of hundred years, with families with massive size populations. That's only since like the 1800s when we suddenly had technology to support that. So just because our own societies just because it looks like evolution is ruled by this need to propagate and to grow, doesn't mean that every society would have that.
I tend to lean into any society that does want to grow, therefore does want to explore. I mean, the only reason I would see them not wanting to would be some sort of external pressure, like we've briefly touched on before, if some evil civilization that they know about that could come along and kill them off.
Yeah, and they're hiding.
That, as to be honest, they've realized that space travel's hard and they're just going to sit at home, some hedonistic lifestyle in VR, and send out robots instead. But I still think a society will expand regardless of what form that is in. It will always expand, and then therefore there would be traces of them.
And we'll likely have curiosity as well.
But then we're basing a lot on what humans are, right?
What it was otherwise, why would they be intelligent? Intelligent life forms breed curiosity, breeds intelligence.
I mean, I assume they have a telescope in space, just like we have Hubble in space, and they're trying to figure out what's out there around us, right?
But then how many humans are curious? Do you know what I mean?
Plenty.
I think we all are. But maybe like the scientists and the pioneers, and do you know what I mean? Yeah, there was you look back in history and you look at the explorers and people who, pushed on to new, ecosystems and different habitats. But a lot of people just are like, nah, I'm good. Just watch TV.
You don't need the whole society to be curious.
It's true. You just need a certain percentage of them to be curious.
Yeah, you just need those few pathfinders, and you need a collective curiosity.
Yeah.
So I'm quite happy not leaving the house and someone else doing the hard work and reading about it later. But I'm still curious.
And you're curious in that sense, yeah.
But I think we have that collective curiosity. I think, the moon landing was probably one of the best watched TV moments of all time.
Yeah.
We're still happy, I think, that we have the Hubble scope. And I think the space shuttle for many people was a fascination when it went out. At least for me, it was one of my childhood greatest things that I could think about. I think a lot of the world is very curious about it. I think maybe it's been away for a little bit. SpaceX is definitely bringing it back again as well.
We've come to the Drake equation to say, following my lead, I think that actually there's probably quite a lot of them, and if there are, or at least there's one of them, and if there is one of them, then they would want to expand. Then it kind of leads us into the next few questions of, well, if they're out there and there's lots of them and we still haven't seen them, we still haven't found them. We've already touched on the communication area. So the other way we can look at going is are we, are we late to the party? Is there already other people out there and we're just crashing into their late? Or are we in a certain section of the galaxy or universe that is quiet? We're in the suburbs where no one else is.
We're in Tatooine, basically, in the outer rim. No one goes there. You know what I mean? Could be. Well, I've always loved the idea that like we're like aliens are already here, like Men in Black. Do you know what I mean? And it's
X-Files, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, X-Files, Men in Black, all these ones. I believe that probably for most of my life.
I've never believed them.
Is this going down the human zoo?
Yeah, the human zoo, or like Stargate SG-1, and they would, and the same in Star Trek. They'd make contact with these different civilizations, and they wouldn't enlighten them about the fact that we're from another planet, and there's this whole gates we step through and warp technology, and until they would just say, "Oh, you're gods, yeah, well we're mates of your gods," and they would just do that. So maybe astronauts came in the past and just did the same thing to us, and we're just like, yeah, like I'm Zeus.
But that's what we'll be doing if we ever encounter another civilization.
Exactly,
that's
right?
what we already did when our boats
Absolutely.
arrived in place like Vanatau. Prince Charles has died, and he was actually veneered as a god by a Vanatau tribe because they saw him and the queen, and they saw how much adoration he got, how much respect he got, and so they figured he must be a god.
Yeah, I have heard that.
And so this is what will happen if us humans arrive in another planet. Like, we'll be the gods. It's going to be a cargo cult for sure.
Yeah, I was going to bring this up earlier when we were talking about sort of finding more technologically advanced civilizations. Because ideally we want to find more primitive ones. Because otherwise, how else are we going to enslave them?
It's always worked best for us. Yeah.
I mean, we're going to solve racism by enslaving other species,
and then have speciesism. But we already have speciesism. Do you know what I mean?
Actually, which is what we already do. Yeah.
Like with animals. Do you know what I mean? I reckon if there is intelligent life, and they let's say they're super intelligent, like Star Trek, and they can see us, and then they're just like, right, let's have a look what they're doing. Enslaving loads of animals, destroying the planet. Nuclear bombs. Maybe we should just leave them alone for a little bit and see if they actually make it. So maybe
if we turn up to another planet, we're going to ask two things. We're going to be like, first of all, do you have any guns? Secondly, do you taste better than chicken?
Well, to your point, Finn, I assume you've watched a lot of Star Trek, and what happens is every single time they bring up the Prime Directive, we must not interfere.
Prime Directive, exactly.
But every episode, they bring up the Prime Directive, they fuck that up, and go and speak to them anyway.
Yeah.
So one of my problems with the human zoo hypothesis is the fact that the aliens are sat out there watching us, and they've got some civilization that says, nope, we shall not interfere, don't do it. Is there might be, it only takes one alien to reach out to us and say, do you know what? I'm happy to get lined up and shot, firing squad. If I can turn around and on my headstone, I could say, I enlightened a whole civilization.
But to be fair,
I saved a whole civilization.
To be fair, Johnny, there are people saying that now.
David Bowie.
There's people going like, I'm in contact with the Palladians. I don't know if you've gone that deep into the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, but there's people who are like, I'm communicating with aliens, and this is what they're saying.
I touch on it,
and we're just like, they're fucking off their rocker.
The only guy that I
don't listen to
really subscribe to and go, do you know what? I believe his story is that Bob Lazar.
Bob Lazar?
What was he?
Heard of Bob Lazar?
It rings a bell. Can you refresh?
The guy that apparently worked at Area 51.
Yeah. And then he founded a movement, right? And then lots of other people who worked in the government and stuff came out and gave testimonies, didn't they?
I think there was people that around Bob Lazar. Well, there was a news report that came out on American TV by an investigative journalist that just found his story so compelling. And whenever you get conspiracy theories, you always get a little bit of anorak wearing, lives in mother's basement kind of person, but this guy's just not like that, and he's just not. There's been nothing he's tried to gain out of it, and he doesn't want the media. He just thought that people needed to know it and wanted to get it out there, and it's completely ruined his life. And the FBI and Secret Services just fuck with him on a daily basis. And whenever he goes on a TV show, they just cancels credit cards, do everything. It's just there's nothing in.
What was he saying? What's he said? What's his angle?
He's saying that he worked on spaceships and that they compartmentalized a load of these different scientists. So you'd work in a pair and you'd be working on one section of this spaceship, and he was working on a propulsion system, and it was some sort of anti-gravity emitter of some sort using some unknown isotope or unknown element that was not even theorized, but that they had it, and it was called it was 115 apparently on the elemental table. And funny enough, 20 years later, we actually managed to make a stable isotope of this element. And he's also said that these aliens come from a certain planet, and the solar system looks like this because he got this deep briefing when he did it. Funnily enough, a few years later, when we started looking for exoplanets, we find that exact star system, and then there is that shape of planets around it. It's just so much coincidental evidence that he's got, and he's the only person that I would ever hang my hat on. Do you know what? I bloody believe it. And the briefing that they gave him, and he's always said take it with a pinch of salt, because you never know, they're just trying to send you off down a rabbit hole or kind of constrain your thinking. But he said that the briefing he got given when he started working on it was that aliens had been here for a while, and that they were actually affecting our growth as a
not very successful. Hey, fuck those aliens out there that are treating us as the human zoo, but they're not very successful zookeepers, I would say, quite honestly, for the last couple decades. I don't know which way they're going. I think they're a bit schizophrenic as well. Yeah, they want to do good, they want to do bad.
But maybe they can't control everything, though.
Doesn't really make sense.
Maybe they can just really
bored.
Influence.
Just want to see what happens.
I don't know if I believe it.
Yeah.
Give him nukes.
I don't
see
know.
what happens.
I mean, wasn't this the whole idea of putting Trump in office so that Trump could just put this all out? I thought that's why everyone.
Yeah. I think he got briefed.
That's why everyone elected Trump, so that Trump could know the state secrets and finally get them out there. But I think
reveal the Area 51 stuff.
No, I think he got briefed and then was just like, I agree with you. Let's not tell them.
Probably, yeah. But then there's the interesting thing about the Ministry of Defense. After 50 years, they released their documents now. So now we're getting those reports from 50 years ago.
But they got burnt in 2001, 9/11. They were all stored in WTC-7, and WTC-7 exploded under very suspicious reasons because no plane flew in there, but they blew it up.
I didn't know that, but I know that they were meant to. It was only 2 or 3 years ago. Congress were trying to pass a bill to release it again, and then they put the Official Secrets Act back in for another 20 years. So they put them back under wraps, under top secret.
Another 20 years,
dude. They're never gonna tell you. They're never gonna tell you.
It means there's something there.
This is like George Martin. Give it up. You're never gonna read that book. You're never gonna read that book.
I can't leave it, man.
Isn't that the same thing which happened to JFK documents as well?
Yeah. Like,
no, we'll give another 20, 50 years. Yeah,
I think by now, if they just admit that it was a conspiracy between the FBI and CIA, no one's going to give a shit.
Yeah, probably. That's what we thought.
I feel that this episode, we've kind of veered back onto the conspiracy theories track again.
a little bit.
Fine by me, really.
Yeah.
I think that if aliens had come here, we'd probably know a bit more about it.
There's a number of problems with the alien zoo element, the ones I've mentioned before, but it's the fact of what are they doing and how much resources have they got. But a really interesting one, probably one for more the philosophers on this one, is the fact that maybe it's not a physical zoo. And if you know of we all live in a simulation kind of hypothesis, what if it's not a physical zoo, but we are just actually a simulation run by aliens, and they're just watching a computer program.
Absolutely.
Which I found quite an interesting way of looking at it.
And that could be a good way of an advanced civilization teaching their kids about how to, do you know what I mean? How life works and stuff like that. It was Nick Bostrom, wasn't it, who put the argument forward. And if anyone wants to listen to that, we had a guest come on, Lewis Williams, who does Searching for It podcast, and he's got a really concise episode explaining that whole simulation argument. And we talked about it with him a little bit, actually, in the episode that he was on.
I wonder if this is the conversation my Sims have with each other. when they're sitting on the sofa chatting. I don't really understand the language.
But
if they're like sort of just talking to each other, like kind of, what if we're just simulations for someone else's entertainment?
And we couldn't understand
I was in the toilet the other day and someone removed the door.
Right.
But it's freaky because in Sims 4 they can actually play Sims in game.
Inception.
So the question is like, what is the
Inception.
conversation those Sims are having?
Yeah.
It's a good segue to go from the alien part of space into the more quantum physical side of space. Because I think one of the really great things about the last 100 years is that we have discovered so much about our history of space, mostly through the discovery of the wave function, the Schrödinger function, and our discovery of cosmic background radiation, right? To the point where we can say, and I'm not a mathematician, but we can say up until the pentasecond after the Big Bang, which is the 1 until the minus, 24 something of a second, like minute, we can say everything after that, we can exactly explain what happened. We just know, right? But everything that happened exactly before that tiny sliver, we have absolutely no clue how any of the laws of nature ever was able to function before that. And yeah, maybe it was just an alien pressing a button, and then just a split second after the button,
we can see how it works,
there, right?
Yeah, that's the power button.
Yeah.
And then
yeah, so I love
exactly.
like, if we just take away the simulation, I like an explanation that sort of Roger Penrose gave, which took me on a mind trip. And so he tried to instead of going back, he went sort of, okay, what if we go further? Like, what if we go to the end of our universe? So what's happening? It's expanding, and it's cooling down, and eventually what we're left is we're just left with one big soup of photons. Photons will be the only thing that will be left. And photons will not have any mass. And because we won't have any mass, we won't have any way to measure time. And because we have no time, there's no concept of time, there's no concept of dimension, no concept of time. And sort of like it sort of floops into nothing and sort of floops back into something again, which creates the Big Bang. It sort of doesn't make sense anymore. There's nothing to measure. It's unmeasurable. And we flew back into it's measurable again, and it sort of goes into what he calls eons.
Cycle.
Yeah. It kind of took me for a trip, right? What if every concept disappears, right? There's no concept of an observer, of time, of mass, of anything anymore.
Where does all the mass go?
It's if you boil it right the way down, it's E equals mc squared. And if the end of the universe is heat death, when entropy reaches, its penultimate death throes. If you've got no energy left, then you've got no mass left.
Right, and then it start back up again.
Yeah,
or just nothing.
I don't subscribe.
So what
to
happened
that.
then? What's your subscription?
I don't like the heat death either. It sounds boring. I prefer the Big Crunch. But...
Okay, and then from the Big Crunch,
the Big Crunch is that it implodes back on itself.
Like explodes again. It expands again. That's what you think, Johnny?
No, I don't know. I kind of like the white hole kind of thing of this kind of, or the one I saw the other day was the genetic universes, where it was almost playing on the multiverse theory, where black holes suck in information, it squirts it out via white holes into another universe, and each one of those has got a slightly different set of universal properties, and some universes survive, some don't, and it kind of works on that way. I like the genetic one of it, but it's what flavor do you want, really? None of them. I find that sort of stuff so far out there that it's great to think about, but
you can't measure. You can't measure what was there. You cannot measure other worlds either. The one that I have the biggest issue with is the many worlds theory, not the multi-worlds theory, but the many worlds theory.
Right. Yeah.
It's the idea that because of the collapse of the wave function, every time there is any collapse of the wave function, it goes both ways, and we have a constant splitting of the universe, and we have a constant multiplying of universes. Since the universe is quite big, and in every split moment, it's infinitely expanding. It's just too many infinites on infinites on infinites that it just doesn't make any fucking sense. But I've always found it fascinating that Sean Carroll, who I think is quite an eloquent scientist, is so believable in it.
I do follow that, and I do actually think it's got quite a lot of sense, because if you're thinking about it not so much as physical universes, but as in just probabilities happening either way, and that, to be honest, there's likelihoods that there's an inflection where both of those happen, and it does create another instance where you've got these multiple things happening. That I do follow it, and I do think it makes a bit of sense, but I don't think it adds anything to our current understanding. That's the problem. I don't think it folds back into anything that we can actually tangibly use.
I think it's huge if he's right. I think it's quite huge for even the way you live your life. If you exist in an infinite amount of versions of you, and every single moment is a split in different, I think it becomes completely deterministic because you're just the one channel that you're on, and your other versions of you are on other channels making other decisions. So there's no choice anymore because every choice is just different paths, and there's different me's that have made different choices. And no, I think that has huge philosophical implications, which is also why I really do not like this theory.
I'm not sure it makes any difference whether you're in the simulation or whether you're in the many worlds theory. I think it's completely irrelevant to how you live your life, no? Because you're in this one. So it doesn't matter what other possible worlds there are or what other things are outside the simulation. If the simulation is your world, or if your current possible world is your world, it's your world. I don't think it has any philosophical implication. Maybe I'm wrong, but
I don't like the idea of fate and deterministic. It just, what's the point? It just removes all the fun.
If like you could meet up at the end with all your other selves and go, oh, how was that? Yeah. Then maybe it would. Yeah, like if there's like a bonus level.
Did you fuck up that as well? Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, we did. And then some other guy like, ha, I didn't. Idiot.
Or you found out that there are infinite versions of you, but because everything is deterministic, all infinite versions did exactly the same thing as you did. And it's just like...
But then it would just be one possible world, wouldn't it? It's like Rick and Morty. I love that, how they deal with that whole situation, It's very, very funny.
So for you, Johnny, it doesn't matter how it began. It just began.
Yeah, I don't think it doesn't change. I like the mechanics of physics and science. I like... when we understand something, we can go, what could we do with that? And I don't find that those really big questions add anything other than, putting a middle finger up to something like religion.
Or maybe not, though. I think there's quite an interesting dialogue between Dzogchen Buddhism and quite some interpretations of quantum mechanics.
It does go hand in hand.
Where suddenly it is all kind of a bit of an illusion. And since maybe it's all just like vibrations of wave functions, suddenly it becomes very much like spiritual religion. Maybe less like Christian religion, but certainly a lot more like the Asian religions,
Yeah, I do remember, especially with the wave functions, this is a bit of a tangent, but there was one scientist that is a little bit verging onto the pseudoscience, and because the point of the wave function, once you observe it, it becomes one or the other. You can never have all of the properties, and if you observe it, it changes it. He was taking it on a bit of a tangent that if you consciously thought about something, it would change the outcome. And I thought that was a bit, the data behind that actually is a little bit muddy and doesn't really go for it, but it's the same sort of principle. But he was taking the wave function to a very pseudoscientific kind of level, but it was quite an interesting thing to try and debunk. Really, the fact that you could sit in a room and it was almost telekinesis almost, or telepathy, basically affect something from somewhere else purely by consciously thinking about it, but you're effectively observing it.
Because we can be Jedis then, basically.
Yeah, that's my end goal. Yeah,
if we could be Jedis, I'd be extremely happy with that. That'd be great. Then we just need to build good.
Well, have you seen the new Neuralink video where they have a monkey playing pong with his mind?
Why?
Because doing that with a human's ethically.
But with a monkey, it's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The monkey can't consent.
Yeah.
Get a human who can consent.
So, question: who here would get a Neuralink implant?
20 years, everyone is gonna have.
What does it give you? What does it give you?
This is gonna be your interface with your computer. It's gonna be Wikipedia in your mind.
But what do you get if you get the Neuralink thing? You get like a jack in your neck, like in the Matrix.
No, it's like a little coin.
So
it's implanted in your brain. Has some electrodes connected to your brain. Has a Wi-Fi connection. You'll be able to interface with digital systems.
And what benefits does it give you?
I think there's health monitoring, there's communications, there's data. I don't know how much.
It's for people that are so paralyzed they need to be able to speak and they can type with their mind on the computer.
Well, that's pretty handy. If I get paralyzed, I'll get it.
Soon, Finn, within 20-30 years, you'll be interfacing with Wikipedia with this coin in your hand. Definitely.
I'll be that person going, didn't you watch Black Mirror when
Just
we were
wait.
younger?
Like neuroscience is progressing in crazy ways.
Maren, I love your mix of like optimism and cynicism for the future. Like, yes, right before we nuke ourselves to extinction,
It's
we're
going
going to be
to
able to
be-
communicate
exactly.
with our toasters
This is going
using
to be
our
a very
brains.
interesting lifetime. Just ours. And the next generation is going to be fucked.
It's going to be all or nothing.
If we said to somebody 10, 15, 20 years ago that you'd have a little box in your pocket that would have the collective knowledge of the whole world, mankind in, somebody would, they'd think you're mad. And if you think 20 years time, that expands to the fact that actually we're all fundamentally linked together via some, neural link, and we've all got everyone's collective consciousness. That is amazing. But I just really can't get over the fact that if I go to Wikipedia, if I go to a website, 20% of it is information, and that's if you're lucky. The rest of it's ads and spam and do I want to consent?
Yeah, and you get that in your head.
That shit
No
in
way.
my brain.
Exactly.
I really don't want that shit in my brain.
Unless you can get
and
decent
I don't like the idea of getting hacked. I mean, even with just social engineering, I can get hacked. I don't want an easier route in. It scares me. Really does.
Targeted ads in your sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if I could do some work in my sleep, then I could get more sleep. That would be good.
Then again, guys, have you thought about this? If it had a mute button, I'd probably get it, to be honest. Mute people in real life. That'd be amazing. Especially if you're living in a country, I'm not going to name which, where people speak very, very loudly. You could mute like drilling sounds when you're trying to sleep in the morning. Oh, I don't think you put a price on that. I might even tolerate adverts for that.
I feel that after we've dismantled capitalism, then put something in my brain. But before, I'm good.
Yeah.
It's just Zuckerberg jacking himself unconscious to the thought of actually being able to access our brains directly.
But Johnny, didn't people say that about like online banking though? Do you know what I mean? The same arguments, right?
I mean, I'm probably being. I never thought I'd get to this point and be kind of shunning of technology, but I just do think that cyborgs and brain implants is kind of where I get to the point, right? It scares me. Although Maren's point about computer human interface devices, they invented the keyboard and mouse many years ago, and we haven't come up with a better solution.
Yeah.
Really
and even in films, all we're doing is waving. But if you really think at the way neuroscience is going at the moment, it doesn't even need to be an implant. It can be a helmet you're wearing as well. It's going into that
right?
way of interfacing, and whether you or how many people are going along with it, plenty of people are going to go along with it, and it's going to happen within the next couple of decades, for sure.
Maybe you have
that's where the Oculus is going next. So I know not the next one, but the one after that, they are looking at brain interfaces. Well, not actually wetware interfaces, but actually, using your brain to control it. So I have an Oculus under my desk. I absolutely love it. It is amazing. I really think VR is.
So you're saying you don't want to
gaming.
go that far into brain implanting, but you are going into this sort of alternate reality that I'm shying away from, right? Like I'm keeping myself away from VR because I think it.
You think you can take it off?
For now, you're taking it off, right? Like it's.
you think that you've taken it off?
Yeah. What if it gets so realistic you don't even want to take it off anymore, and it can go there, right?
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Addiction.
Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of, it's probably that fear that you've got in the back of your head as you just, take another hit of the needle, but you're just like, oh, it is too good. I'm just gonna, eventually I'll come to terms with my own fate.
So this is going to happen when we're going to do interstellar travel as well. We're just going to put you into a VR world. Yeah. We're going to put some feeding tubes into you, and you're just going to live 20 years in VR until you wake up. And then you really need to have a forget your memory pill, because we've talked about this in the previous episode.
You would not want to be
You don't want to remember 20 years of a different life that you've had and then wake up on Mars, right? Like...
No. If you're the working class, it'll be 20 years of labor programs.
Training, right?
You get to learn how to build Elon Musk's harem.
Yeah. Or it'd just be like kind of like boring, like in the Matrix. They're like, well, the first one was a paradise, and you rejected that, so we made it like kind of a bit shit. Or like the video game Roy in Rick and Morty, where you just have to like live the life of like just some average dude like for 50 years, and you wake up and you're like, where's my wife and kids? So
we can
funny.
segue into interstellar travel, because that is actually one of the better options, because there are a load of social impacts with long-term space travel. I mean, if you're just talking about one person in VR or in deep sleep, waking up at a distant location to start a new colony, it's a good way of doing it, because you can keep the mind working. But there's drawbacks to the fact that who's going to maintain the ship if it's a very, very long journey. And then there's other considerations of, well, what if it's a multi-generational ship where it's the journey's 300 years and people in the middle of the 5 generations in the middle of that journey never ever see anything.
It becomes
and all
a
their job
myth
is to
as
purely
well.
procreate.
Imagine that, right? It becomes a religion, a myth. It's like our elders created this idea of a travel that we need to undertake. But wait, what's going on? Do we still agree with this?
Yeah.
Someone must
yeah.
have written that book. That sounds like sci-fi story that already exists.
Yes, somebody has written it, and it was in the 70s, I believe. I can't remember.
There's a great one from a fellow countryman of yours, Toby, a story called Anyara. I don't know if it is an epic poem written in the 70s. Maybe it's the same one, Johnny, that we're talking about. But it's not quite the same. And then it's also made into a film recently. That's amazing. It's really, really good. It's basically about that, but something goes wrong. I don't want to say more because I really highly recommend it.
Oh, if we're recommending books, I really want to drop Seven Eves by Neil Stevenson. Seven Eves. And the idea is that the moon explodes accidentally. Then after the moon explodes, all the chunks of the moon land on the Earth. Basically, the whole Earth dies, and just a few ships are launched up into space just before Earth dies, and then whatever happens to that part of civilization in current technology, right? It's not like weird technology, but it's like, okay, good luck with that. You're just.
It's a book.
Last ditch attempt. Yeah.
It's a book.
Is it a book or film?
It will be a film eventually.
What about Toby and Johnny? Do you have any recommendations, films, books, and such, sci-fi or science related to space?
I'm not massively into sci-fi. I really want to read. Is it Foundation? No.
Asimov.
Not Asimov. No, because my dad tried to get me to read Asimov, and I just can't get into it. Same thing with Dune, but no, it's Banks. Ian Banks.
Ian Banks, yeah, I've heard of him.
Yeah, he wrote a whole series of books, and it's basically it's technically socialism in space, and I really want to read it.
That's why you want to read it, isn't it?
Well, no, it's basically like a post-scarcity society, fully implemented, technically socialist utopia kind of thing, and then works on that.
Yeah,
it sounds very good, but I just haven't found it.
Yeah. Johnny, anything from you?
I'm crap with books, crap with films.
Or a series,
I watch absolutely terrible
a YouTube channel,
terrible action films. But if I had to say what was the most scientific, realistic thing that really picked me up and made me think about stuff recently, was actually The Expanse, in the way that it mostly with the way it dealt with zero G and the way they built their ships, designed their ships. So bulky, they all stuck the engines. Yeah, they were all long and thin, and the engines were all on one end, and they would always be accelerating or decelerating, which is exactly right. And when they were accelerating towards somewhere, they'd have gravity because they'd accelerate roughly at a G of acceleration all the time, which made perfect sense. And then they'd spin it round and start to slow down. And the point where they said, we're turning the engines off, everyone started floating and stuff floated around. And when they spun it back round again and slowed down again, same thing would happen. And a few other things in that were absolutely bang on. There's a couple of things that were a little bit, mad, but they did it very, very, very well.
Season's really, really good. I really, really enjoyed the first season, and then
I haven't seen it yet.
All of it.
It goes a little bit.
It's really worth a watch.
Weird,
cool.
but
it is
good
good.
after that.
Yeah.
I'd recommend one more. I'll get two because it was a book, and the other one's a book. It's called War and Peace by not Dostoevsky, but Joe Hadlam. And this was about, we were talking about different civilizations and communication. This supposes there's another civilization that's a similar technological level to Earth, maybe set like 50 years in the future when we've got better space tech. And they encounter each other, and basically through a miscommunication start a war. And then it tells how the war happens and unfolds. But bearing in mind that like it's 50 years or 10, 20 years to get to the front line of the war. So it keeps changing. And
that's crazy.
like that. It's really, really good. Yeah. Really cool concept, yeah. And then the second book...
You get two, I get two. So the best sci-fi resource for little snippets of little brain ticklers is a YouTube channel called Dust.
Yeah, short film channel.
Yeah, they're very, very good. They promote a lot of short film writers. Some of the concepts they've got now.
I've watched a lot of them. Yeah, a lot of time for that. Good stuff. So I think we should wrap it up there, guys. What do you think?
Yeah, fair.
Thanks very much. What a pleasure.
Good
if you want to support us on Patreon, you can go to Patreon. We've got Discord and everything now, haven't we?
Yeah, we've got it all.
YouTube's and from Spain, I'm Finn.
From Amsterdam, I'm Marijn.
From Stockholm, I'm Toby.
From England, I'm Johnny.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all.